past 3 hours, we want to review now what our crew's been doing. And there you see them, Jasmin Moghbeli, Andreas Mogensen, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov. They have been getting ready to launch into space. Let's take a moment now to recap the overnight launch preparations. After waking up and having a meal, SpaceX helped the astronauts into their suits, as you can see right here at the historic quarters suit-up room. Then the crew, well, once they got their suits pressure tested, they walked right out of the same path that every NASA astronaut has done since Apollo 7, waving to family and loved ones after getting inside their Teslas with the gull-wing doors coming down. They joined a caravan led by Center Security on a 20-minute ride to Launch Complex 39A.
Big smiles all around.
All the way around. And then following their arrival to the pad, they got a look at their rocket, and in they went, walking across the crew access arm. And we now have crew access arm retraction. So if you look in your screen, you can see there the crew access arm moving away from the Dragon. Another great shot of it there, articulating away. It takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to move away, and this is a critical milestone, Jessica, as that arm moves away, because now that means if the astronauts needed to get off that rocket for whatever reason, they could either bring the arm back quickly, and it can move, as I understand it, a lot faster than it's moving now in the case of an emergency egress, or they would move forward and arm the launch escape system. That hasn't been armed yet. So this is the moving and stowing of the crew access arm so that we can clear that away from the rocket and get ready to lift off.
As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew-7 to the International Space Station today. Starting from the very top of the vehicle is the Dragon spacecraft. In total, there are 16 Draco thrusters Dragon can use in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
And just wanted to note, one thing that we did miss just a moment ago was a call to the crew. There was a sensor issue that they are tracking. However, they are just continuing with the count, continuing to monitor it. And so we are continuing to discuss what we have in front of us, which is Dragon. Together, the Dragon spacecraft and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus 1 under the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight. The trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo, and on some cargo resupply missions, we use Dragon's trunk to deliver the new solar arrays that are being installed on the space station.
As always, Dragon will be delivered to orbit today by SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, which provides 1.7 million pounds of thrust on its first stage, thanks to its 9 Merlin M1D engines. Once the first and second stages separate, these engines are also used to help land the first stage. The first stage will perform 3 burns today as it makes its way back down to Earth. First is the boost back burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite to help flip the first stage around to head back to the launch site. The second burn is the entry burn. That's where a single engine will reignite and shut down to help slow Falcon 9 down as it prepares to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And then finally, the landing burn. That'll be where 3 engines will slow down the rocket enough to perform a precision landing back down on landing zone 1.
Meanwhile, the second stage continues to orbit, powered by 1 single Merlin vacuum engine with over 220,000 pounds of thrust. The second stage will secure Dragon's entry into low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station on its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing its guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
So there we heard the call out that we are preparing for strong back retract. And as Leah just mentioned, the strong back is that white truss structure that you see on the left side of Falcon 9. Got a better shot of it right there.
Strong back is retracting.
Just before lift. There we heard the call out from mission control that we are retracting the strong back now. The strong back is part of the transporter erector, which was used not only to roll Falcon 9 out to the launch pad, but also to raise it into its vertical position. It will retract just about 2 degrees first after those clamp arms open up around the base of Dragon's trunk, and then just before liftoff, we'll actually go all the way back to 45 degrees retracted to give Falcon 9 and Crew-7 room for liftoff.
Now under 4 minutes until launch. Next up, we're looking for the first stage liquid oxygen loading to finish at T-minus 3 minutes. You're starting to see some white clouds on your screen. That is vapor, it's normal. We'll continue to see that build up as we get closer to launch. Obviously, this liquid oxygen that we're loading is super chilled, so a little bit of that will boil off in the hot Florida air.
Stage 1 lock loading is complete.
Great view of Crew-7 there inside of the Dragon spacecraft, awaiting liftoff just under 3 minutes from now.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Dragon's in terminal count.
Dragon's flight computer in countdown and configured for launch, and the flight termination system now armed less than a minute until liftoff today.
Dragon, SpaceX,
this flight termination
go for
system.
launch.
Dragon copy, go for launch.
You heard it, Crew-7 getting the go for launch, just
T-minus
30 seconds away for an on-time launch. At the time of liftoff today, the space station will be flying 260 miles over southeastern Iraq.
T-minus 15. Okay, minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine full power, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, go Crew-7.
Endurance ascends, an international crew
Copy, 1
destined
Alpha.
for the International Space Station.
Stage 1
That's
propulsion is
1.7
nominal.
million. Good calls from the propulsion officers here. Propulsion's nominal. 1.7 million pounds of thrust on Falcon 9, taking Crew-7 to the International Space Station, now traveling almost 300 miles per hour.
Nominal power and telemetry.
We are just about T
Stage 1
plus
throttle
45
down.
seconds into the 7th rotational crew mission on board Dragon and Falcon 9, and right now the vehicle is throttling down to help us pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure. There's the call out that Crew-7 is now moving faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
Stage 1 throttle up.
Confirmation we have moved through max Q and are throttling back up.
Copy, 1 Bravo.
Heard that call from Jasmine on Crew-7, as well as confirmation from the ground. The call out for 1 Bravo means we are in the second and final abort mode for the first
MVAC
stage,
chill is
continuing to
underway.
get good performance. We've got engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine. We will then be looking for MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages, separating. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite. We are now coming up on 2 minutes into the flight, the spacecraft traveling over 2,000 miles per hour.
Really incredible nighttime views of Falcon 9 and Crew-7 on your screen right now. So as Leah just mentioned, we are keeping an eye on a couple of critical flight milestones coming up back to back here.
Stage 1 throttle
Those are
down.
going to be MECO, so main engine cutoff now that we're throttling down stage 1, followed by stage separation and second stage ignition.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
MVAC ignition.
So there you heard and saw Miko stage sep, and hopefully you heard Jasmin call out for the 2 Alpha abort mode just before second stage ignition. At this point in the flight, we are just about 15 seconds away from stage 1 entry burn start. At this point, the center engine on Falcon 9 will be lit for just about 10 seconds to help us slow the vehicle down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. That's not the only thing helping us on re-entry, though. The first stage sees high drag on re-entry, which scrubs roughly 70% of the velocity by the time the landing burn begins, which you just had great views of on the left-hand side of your screen. Florida Space Coast beginning to come into view in the background. All while Crew-7, of course, on the right-hand side of your screen, lit up by that MVAC engine, continues on its way to orbit.
And we are now coming up on continuing to get good calls as we reach almost 7 minutes into the flight. Crew traveling at 9,400 miles per hour. Again, we still have about 1 minute, 45 seconds left with the second stage propelling the crew.
And of course, we are also expecting that landing burn start from Falcon 9 any second now. Great views.
Stage 2 FTS has saved.
Great news there that stage 1 has successfully landed back at landing zone 1 in Florida.
That's the first look at the crew, now in microgravity, confirmation of a good Earth orbit insertion. We are now coming up on 10 minutes into the flight. Of course, we saw second stage engine cutoff, and you're actually getting a look at their zero-G indicator there. We'll stand by for them to tell us a little bit more about that shortly, but we are also standing by for second stage separation from Dragon.
Acquisition a signal in Finland. Dragon separation confirmed.
Crew-7, on behalf of the Falcon team, I'd like to welcome you to orbit, and we hope you enjoyed the ride on Falcon 9. Space travel is difficult, even though you make it look easy, so thank you for trusting us to get you up there. It's not a bad way to spend a day in the office. Stand by for words from the launch director.
Hello, Crew-7. This is Launch Director here on Countdown. On behalf of the entire SpaceX Launch and Recovery team, I'm honored to welcome Dragon's first ever all-international crew to orbit. Счастливого пути, Gotor, Iterashai. Godspeed, Crew-7. Cheers.
SpaceX, thanks for the ride. It was awesome. On behalf of Andy, Satoshi, Toshi, and I, we'd like to thank the multitude of people who've led us to this unique moment. We may have 4 crew members on board from 4 different nations, Denmark, Japan, Russia, and the USA, but we're a united team with a common mission. We hope the work we do serves to benefit our beautiful home planet and those on it. As you said, human spaceflight requires an unparalleled level of vigilance and rigor, and we thank all those who prepared not only us, but also this truly impressive spacecraft for flight. Finally, to our families, the greater burden of our choice to explore. Thank you. Go Crew-7. Awesome ride.